Hello petals, my name is Anais. I am a womb witch, a Rahani energy teacher, and a plant alchemist. Under Unfurling Alchemy, I guide women in reconnecting with their power, awakening their essence, and step into sovereignty. In these episodes, I am going to approach topics around womb mysteries, energy healing, and cyclic living. Hello petals! In this episode, I want to talk to you about the life cycle of a healing journey. If you have been on your healing journey for a while, you will probably recognize this. You had this light bulb moment and suddenly you're seeing this pattern so clearly. So you are crying it through, you are doing the somatic work, you are journaling, you're working through it, you're moving through it, and something genuinely shifts. And you really think that you have done it, you have healed this one specific thing, this one particular wound. And then at some point in some new context, it comes back. The same flavor, the same arch, the same pattern, wearing slightly different clothes. And something in you just sinks because you really thought that you were done with this. And that sinking feeling is one of the most common things I encounter in the women I work with. And yeah, I have lived it myself more times than I can count. And what I want to say here really clearly before we go any further is that this is not failure. This is not evidence that the work is not working. This is what healing actually looks like. Because a healing journey isn't linear. In my opinion, it is a spiral. And once you understand that, once you really let that land, not just as a concept, but as a felt truth about how this actually works, everything changes. The returning stops feeling like defeat. It starts feeling like depth, like evidence that you are ready for something you are not ready for before. And this is what I want to explore with you today. You may have been given in many healing and personal development spaces a very clear picture of what a healing journey looks like. You identify the wound, you do the work, you heal, you move on. Clean, complete, done, very masculine. And that picture is so appealing because it has an endpoint, it promises arrival, it suggests that if you work hard enough and long enough and sincerely enough, you will get to a place where the thing that used to hurt you no longer does. That the pattern that used to run your life just has no longer any form of grip on you. And where you are finally healed. But in my opinion, that is not what actually happens. Not for most people, not for the deepest wound, not for the deep wound that live so fully in your core, not for the things that have shaped you at a fundamental level. What actually happens is the spiral. You work on something and you genuinely move through the layer of it. Something real shifts. You are not the same that you were. And then time passes and life moves on and you grow and you change. And at some point, in some new context, at some new milestone or threshold or difficulty, the wound surfaces again. Not because you did not heal the last layer, but because you are now ready for the next one. The spiral does not mean that you are going backwards, it means that you are going deeper. Each time you return to that familiar territory, you are bringing more capacity than you had before. More self-awareness, more tools, more willingness to really look. And so what you find when you return is not exactly what you have found the last time. It is a deeper layer, a more fundamental truth. Something that was waiting for you to be ready enough to see it. And that is not a burden. That is actually the most helpful thing I can tell you about your healing journey, because it means that there is always more available, always more depth to go to, always more of yourself to come back home to. So I just want to walk you through what in my opinion, the stages of the spiral are, or the turns of the spiral. Because naming them, I feel like it helps to identify where you're at, and it helps you trust the process even when you are at the unglamorous, chaotic middle of it. So the first stage is the epiphany. This is the aha moment. This is the moment something clicks, a light bulb, something that is just blowing your mind. Sometimes it happens in a ceremony or a session or retreat. Sometimes it happens in just an ordinary conversation. Sometimes it happens in the middle of the night when something you have been circling for months suddenly makes sense. The epiphany, the light bulb, it is the moment a pattern becomes visible. It is the moment you can name something that has been living inside of you, that you have been living without knowing what it was. And it feels like relief because it feels like recognition. Like finally, oh, that's it. But the epiphany is not the healing. It is the beginning of the healing. It is the catalyst moment. It is the moment you can finally see what you are working with. What comes after is where the real work lies. The second stage is the recognition of the pattern. Once you had this light bulb moment, you start seeing it absolutely everywhere. In your relationships, in your choices, in the way you react to certain situations, in the stories you tell yourself, in the things you constantly attract. This stage is both liberating and deeply frustrating and uncomfortable because you cannot unsee what you have seen. And now every time the pattern runs, you know it's running. You see it. You watch yourself doing it anyway. And that gap between seeing and changing is one of the most humbling places on the healing journey. The third stage is working with the pattern. It is the long middle, the unglamorous part of the healing journey that nobody talks enough about, in my opinion. Not the breakthrough, not the light bulb moment, not the moment of revelation, but the slow, consistent, sometimes tedious, sometimes frustrating work of actually changing how you respond, of catching yourself mid-pattern and making a different choice, of the same trigger arising and choosing differently even when the old response is pulling so hard at you to choose the old patterns, and of doing it again and again and again, not perfectly, not without slipping back into the old ways sometimes, but consistently, persistently, with compassion and grace for yourself when you do not get it right, and with recommitting when you do. And this is where most of the healing actually happens, not in the epiphanies, in the long, unglamorous middle. And that deserves to be honored because the long middle gets very little celebration because nobody posts about the day they caught themselves in an old pattern and chose differently for the 14th time this month. Nobody marks the quiet Tuesday where they noticed the familiar feeling rising again and they did not act on it. But those moments, invisible and as unglamorous as they are where actually the healing lives. The fourth stage is really breaking the pattern. And this is the moment you realize something has genuinely shifted. Not that it is gone, not that it will never rise again, but your relationship with it has changed. That you just respond differently. That you make a choice you would have not made before. That the old trigger came up and something in you stayed steady rather than being swept away. This is real, it is absolutely worth celebrating, and it's the evidence that the long middle was not wasted. And then we are in the fifth stage, the rebirth, right? And that is the choosing differently. You're living from this new place, that integration, not a permanent arrival, not perfection, but genuine change that shows up in your daily life, in your relationships, in your choices, in your new baseline. This is your new normal. It is integrated. This is the new you. And then the spiral turns again. And it could be something completely new that reveals itself because you have done enough work to go deep enough to find it. It could be a new layer of the same wound. And yeah, you begin again, not from the beginning, but from a deeper place, with more capacity, with more self-understanding, with more trust in the process. And I do want to say something quite honest here about the different turns of the spiral, because they're not all the same. Like, I have found in my journey and witnessing my clients, like some layers are really like manageable. Some feel almost gentle in comparison to what came before. And some are brutally activating, raw in a way that surprises you even after everything you have already been through. Some turns of the spiral will bring you to your knees in a way that the earlier ones didn't, because the deeper you go, the more fundamental the material and fundamental wounds, the ones that are very core of how you were shaped, they don't always yield gently. They yield honestly, and honestly is sometimes very hard. And this is not something many people in the healing space, I feel, talk about clearly enough. This assumption that can be that the more work you do, the easier it gets. And in some ways, I think it's true. Because I feel like in some ways there is more trust in the process and you are understanding things more, and it's less all kind of like new and unsettling for you. But in other ways, the deeper layers, they ask more of you precisely because they go deeper. And they require more courage, more capacity to sit in the discomfort without running, more willingness to go somewhere where you have not been willing to go before. Because also most of the time at this stage, you are out of like the survival. And so there is a real part of like you really choosing to do this work out of desire than out of need. And this is not a reason to be afraid of the spiral. It is a reason to go into it with honesty about, what it actually asks. So I wanted to, in this podcast, to talk about 2 concrete examples of spirals for me. And there is the very known spiral, and then there was one that was the hidden spiral, like one that really took me by surprise. But we will start by the one that was like really obvious to me, like the one that I always knew, one that I was very consciously aware of my whole life. So when I started on my healing journey, this is, the first spiral that I entered, because it was so blatantly obvious that this was going to be really crunchy for me and that it had shaped me fundamentally. And that is the mother wound. It has honestly been such a core part of my healing journey. And I always knew it was there from very early on. The abandonment, the disconnect, the places where the absence of consistent, safe maternal love had shaped me in such incredible fundamental ways. I knew this was mine to work with, absolutely. And I knew that this was going to be a lifelong thread. Quite early on, I recognized that, I think this is going to be with me until my last breath in one layer or another. And it has this far shown up at every milestone. Graduating, moving, my wedding. Every significant moment in my life has brought a new layer of this to the surface. And for the longest time, for years, each time it arrived, I was like, fuck me, here we go again. This again? Really? Can every single thing in my life point back to this? And it used to frustrate me like so much, because I felt just like I will never be able to get over this. And actually redefining my relationship like with the spiral and trusting the process has offered me like so much like clarity and so much freedom in this, and really like a genuine like depth within like the process, and just acceptance that this is part of it. And how much this pattern of the mother wound and the spiral of the mother wound has impacted my life has gradually like diminished like over time. Absolutely, like this used to run the show, absolutely, completely, like the main part, like so loud, influencing every single thing that I did. But actually, now whilst like those layers still like reveal themselves, there is also like a comfort in knowing that I'm still going like through the depths to like the layers of it, and each time it reveals something that I could not see the last time. And the early layers, they were really about like abandonment and the patterns of being left, the way I had learned to hold myself at a certain distance from the people I loved the most because the risk of being left was just too great to allow full closeness. The way I kept one foot out of the door, even in my most important relationships. That was really like the first layers, clear, recognizable, something I worked with for a really long time. And then the spiral turned, and underneath the abandonment was something deeper: shame, unworthiness, the belief that the abandonment was my fault, that if I had been different, more lovable, less difficult, more worthy, it would have not happened. The wound moving from about what had happened to me, about what it meant about me. And then the spiral turned again, and underneath the shame there was really the core of it. The thing at the very bottom of the well, or at least I do so believe right now. The belief that I am not worthy of love. Not the intellectual understanding of it, but the deep, embodied, cellular, bone-deep belief that love is not something I fundamentally deserve. It has to be earned. It can be taken away. That I am always, underneath everything, waiting for it to go. Each of those turns was different levels of intensity. And yeah, the first layers, they were hard, but navigable. Like, I could work through it because they were very clear. There was a lot of conscious awareness of it. And the deeper ones were more activating, more raw, more destabilizing before they began to shift. And that is, part of what I want to say, honestly, about the spiral. Like, yeah, the deeper you go, and in a way, the more it asks of you. And the more important it becomes to have the right support around you as you get there. But there are also some parts that I feel become easier because you understand the process. But each time I returned, I was not returning to the same place. I was returning with more capacity to look, with more willingness to go deeper, more ability to meet what was there without flinching away from it. And so what I found each time was really not the same. It was the next layer, the one I could have not accessed before, the one that had been waiting for me to be ready. And so this is the work, still ongoing, still revealing, still taking me somewhere. The second spiral, the hidden one, the wound that I did not know was there. And now when I'm thinking about it, I'm laughing because now I'm finding it so obvious. But honestly, for a big, big part of my life, like, this was something that was a complete blind spot to me. My father died when I was a toddler, and I had no memory of him, no sense of him as a presence in my life, just absence, a gap where something should have been. And for years, I did not fully comprehend the weight of that, because how do you grieve something you never had? How do you feel the loss of a presence you never knew? How do you quantify the impact of an absence? There was no memory to mourn, no relationship to process, just a space where a father should have been. And so, yeah, I told myself that I was fine. I stepped deeper into my masculine. It had no real effect on me. That you cannot miss something that you never had. But the wound was there, quietly, persistently, hidden underneath everything else, laced inside the abandonment wound in a place I had not yet gone deep enough to find, because they live in the same place. And yeah, in ceremony, there he was. Something I had never consciously connected to my healing journey suddenly revealed itself as one of the most fundamental threats: the absence of a father, the weight of that absence in my body, the way it had shaped everything in ways I had never seen. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I saw it in the name that I lost when my brother's father gave me his name after he came into my life. And for a time, that felt like belonging, like being chosen, like being included in something solid. And then the divorce happened and the name went with it, as if the belonging had always been provisional, always conditional, as if being chosen had, terms and conditions I had not been told about and somehow I had failed at. And the grief of that, which I had never fully allowed myself to feel, was enormous when it finally surfaced. Because it was not just a name, it was the proof that I had been wanted. And having that proof removed taught me something I carried for a long time, that being chosen doesn't mean staying chosen. And then I saw this as well in my grandfather, who rebuilt his life after loss with very little space for me in it, who was present but never quite available, there but not quite there, and how unfamiliar that felt. Oh, how actually familiar that felt. How much I had learned to accept that version of presence from the man in my life, present but distant, there but not quite choosing me. I saw it in the relationship with my father-in-law, the strange discomfort of navigating that relationship without any template for what a healthy father-daughter dynamic was supposed to look like. Not knowing how to be, not knowing what was normal, not knowing how to receive that kind of care from a man, that kind of role, because I had never had a map for it. And so I held him at a certain distance without fully understanding why. Not because he was not safe, but because safety from a father figure was something I had no embodied experience of. I saw it in my marriage, in the moments when my husband spoke about his own father, about their relationship, about what that bond felt like from the inside, and not fully reach him there. I could not understand from an embodied perspective what it meant to have a father who stayed, who showed up, who chose you. I could witness it, I could honor it, but I could not truly share it because there was a whole landscape of experience that I simply didn't have access to. I saw it in the long lines of father figure that had followed this original absence, this pattern of presence without full commitment, of being chosen but not quite fully, of men who were there but always somehow out of reach. And I never connected that pattern to him, to that first absence, to the one that taught me before I had words for it that man leave, even if it wasn't his fault that he died. And I saw how all of that pushed me so deeply in my masculine, how the absence of safe, present, reliable male energy had made it so that I couldn't trust it. I could not lean into it, could not receive it from it. And so I had become it instead, self-sufficient, defended, capable, not needing more. Not because needing more because needing more who might not stay felt too dangerous. Because needing someone who might not stay felt too dangerous. And then something else. Something that still moves me when I think about it. Which is probably why I'm choking up a little bit just saying it. My best friend's family. Because along all the absence, I was gifted something I did not expect. My best friend's family and their love, her father in particular, who created space for me in a way that I had never experienced from a man in that role, who saw me, who showed up, who became over years of friendship a father figure in a way I had stopped believing was available to me. And at my wedding, it was him I danced with. The father-daughter dance. the thing I had quietly grieved the possibility of for most of my life. The moment I had assumed would just be one of those things that was not for me. And there I was, dancing with a man who had chosen to be present in my life in a way my own father never could be. This is the spiral, revealing something unexpected. Not just the wound, but the healing that was available even within the wound. The father figure who showed up in unexpected places. The love that found its way in despite absence. The dance I did not think I would get to have. That spiral is still turning, and I am still discovering what my father's absence has shaped in me. Still finding places in hidden inside other wounds, inside other patterns, inside the way I move through the world. But I can see it now, and seeing it means that I can work with it. And working with it means that each turn of the spiral brings me closer to something I'm still moving towards. The spiral is not punishing you. It is not bringing you the same thing back because you failed to heal. It is not evidence that you are too broken or too complicated or too far gone. It is not telling you that you have been doing it wrong. It is taking you deeper. Each time the wound surfaces again, it surfaces because you are ready for the next layer. Because something in you has grown enough, healed enough, open enough to go somewhere in that wound that you could not go before. The wound itself has not changed, but you have. And so each time you return, you are bringing something new to the encounter. More capacity, more compassion, more tools, more willingness to really look at what there is. Maybe it is just a specific technique that you really needed to be able to get there. And sometimes the spiral reveals things that were completely invisible before. Wounds you didn't know were there, patterns you had no access to because you had not done yet enough work to go deep enough to find them. And my father wound was like that for me. Years of work on other things, layers of other wounds, specifically the mother one. And then in ceremony, suddenly there it was. The one that had been underneath everything else, the one I could not have found earlier because I was just not ready for it. And this is not failure, it's depth. This is the healing journey doing exactly what it's supposed to do. The sinking feeling when something comes back is real. And it deserves to be acknowledged. The little violin moment of like, why me again? The voice that says, I thought I was done with this. The exhaustion of being back in territory you thought you had covered. That is absolutely real and I don't want to pretend it isn't. And it's okay to feel it. But just know that underneath that feeling, if you can get quiet enough to find it, there is usually something else. A recognition. A sense of, oh, this again, but differently. A part of you that knows, even in the sinking, that this time you have more to bring to it than you did before. That this time you will be able to go somewhere you could not have gone to last time. And here's something that I have genuinely found to be true across my own healing journey and the work that I do with others. After the first layers of the spiral, you have been around enough times to see how it works. Something shifts. A real trust begins to develop. Not a blind faith, but not a performance of positivity, but an earned, embodied trust in the process itself. And knowing that the reoccurring, that the returning has always had a reason, that the layer has always revealed something worth finding, that the spiral has always eventually taken you somewhere through. That trust does not make the harder layers less hard, but it changes how you meet them. Instead of despair of, here we go again, there is something quiet underneath, a recognition, a willingness, even sometimes a kind of like readiness of attacking this, because you have been here before and you know exactly, not exactly there, but you know exactly how it works. But in the returning, you know, and you know by now that returning is not the end of the work, it's the beginning of a new layer. So what do you do when the spiral turns and familiar territory appears? My invitation is to resist the urge to immediately fix it or shift it or get out of it as quickly as possible. Because the returning is information, and if you move too fast, you get away from the feeling. You miss what it was trying to show you. So try to see if you can meet it with curiosity instead. Not with a demanding, urgent kind of curiosity, but with a gentle, spacious one. What is this layer asking me to see what I could not see before? What am I ready to meet now that I was not ready the last time? What has been waiting for me to go deep enough to find? And then let yourself actually be in it for long enough to find it. Not indefinitely, not without support, but long enough. With enough willingness to look, with enough compassion for the part of you that is finding it hard, with enough trust that builds over turns of spiral, that the returning is purposeful, and even when you can't quite see it yet, like again, the gift of hindsight. The second thing is to notice how you have changed. Because one of the most disorienting things about a spiral is that it can make you feel like you're back at the beginning. Like the work you have done has not mattered. Like you are exactly where you were, but you are not. You are never exactly where you were. Even when the territory feels familiar, you are meeting it with more than you have ever before. So what do you have now that you did not have the last time? More awareness, more language, more tools, more people around who you understand, more trust in the process, more capacity to be with the discomfort without being consumed by it. Those things are real, they matter, and they change what is possible in the layers, even if they do not make the layer feel easy. The courage it takes to keep going, to not give up when the spiral turns and find yourself back in that familiar territory, to not conclude that you are just too broken or too far gone or too complicated to heal, to not use the returning as an evidence of the work being pointless, to trust that going deeper is not the same as going backwards, to honor how far you have actually come even in this moment, even if it doesn't feel like it, to keep showing up for yourself even when the work is unglamorous and slow and invisible to everybody else around you. This is not a small thing. This is one of the most significant things a person can do. Whatever turn of the spiral you're currently on, whatever layer is currently surfacing, whatever wound is currently asking for your attention, the fact that you are still here, still looking, still willing to go deeper, that matters. You are not going backward, you are going deeper. And deeper is exactly where you need to go. Wherever you are in your spiral right now, whatever is currently servicing for you, get curious about it rather than despairing of it. Ask yourself what this layer is asking you to see, what you are ready to meet now that you were not ready before. And then sit with what comes up, with as little judgment as you can, with the quiet recognition that wherever you are is exactly where you need to be right now. Because the spiral always has more to reveal. And you are always ready for exactly the next layer that is currently surfacing. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I see you in the next one, my petals.